Welcome to My Psychedelic Roots, a podcast of conversations with people from a broad swath of lived experience to explore their psychedelic beginnings or roots, what led them to start using psychedelics, what those early experiences were like, and how those roots have impacted their life's unfolding. My name is Amy Bartlett, and it is my hope that these stories, generously shared by my guests, offer perspective and insight into the lived reality of psychedelic experiencing. So whoever, wherever, or whenever you are, welcome. I'm glad you're here. In this episode, we spend time exploring experiences of duality and non-duality with psychotherapist and dear friend Yamina Abassi, who shares her early childhood experiences trying to make sense of herself in relation to the rest of the world, her first psychedelic experience as a teenager, as well as her near-death experience at age 25 and the mystical opening that she went through after the accident. As we will hear in this episode, Yamina is a lover of life with a curious mind, and she makes sense of the hows and whys of life through relationship and connection. Her journey with psychedelics began as a young adult in recreational settings, and she quickly became fascinated with its potential to offer new ways of understanding herself, others, and the world around her. This curiosity and love for people led Yamina to pursue academic avenues, and she completed an undergrad in addictions counseling, as well as a master's in counseling and spirituality, and is currently on the cusp of completing a master's in psychedelic and consciousness. Through her studies, Yamina now serves clients as a psychotherapist, both traditional and as a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist at a ketamine clinic here in Ottawa. I know Yamina to be a heart-filled and heartfelt human being, full of insight, questions, joy, and wisdom. In our conversation, we explore her evolving relationship to herself and others, some of which was undertaken in communion with psychedelics, but a lot of our time is also spent exploring her connections to mystical experience in quote-unquote ordinary states of consciousness as well. We wend our way through her childhood, the deep questions she was sitting with and exploring even then, and we make our way into talking about the near-death experience that she had and the spiritual opening that unfolded in its wake. It is always a pleasure spending time in conversation with this beautiful human, and her warmth, humility, thoughtfulness, and life spark are on full display in this chat together. And so, let's hear more about Yamina's psychedelic roots. Good morning, Yamina.
Good morning, Amy.
It's great to have you here, and so pleased that you're open to sharing about your first psychedelic experience. This is lovely.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I really appreciated, as I was reading through the questions, the opportunity to think back to my first psychedelic experience and to try and thread everything, even from childhood. This is really neat. Thank you.
Oh, of course. And so as we jump in, is there anything important that you think folks should know about your background and life today before we move into exploring your first experience?
Well, I think you did a great job covering my bio, but generally, I think it's just knowing that I'm genuinely a curious person. And sometimes, I am a therapist and I do this kind of work. I do what I do because of who I am. And so, yeah, I'm genuinely just a curious person, which is what I think got me in this space in the first place.
I love how often that sort of curiosity and sort of inclination to inquiry about the world and inquiry to self that forms that basis. And so let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Were you a curious child?
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm.
And I don't know that I was vocally curious, but my mind, we don't know what's normal as a kid. We don't know what other kids are thinking. But I was very, like, existentially inquisitive
Mm.
yeah.
How would you describe your way of seeing the world as a child? What felt true to you then?
That's a really good question. I don't know that anything felt true. I think I was just more curious about what was. Like, I remember always wondering how did we get here? How is this
Mm.
all possible? And wondering, am I being watched? Is there something that can see me? Can others see me? Do others experience life like this? Is it just me here and these are actors? Like, I just always trying to figure out what was happening, but I don't know that I ever had, like, a solid understanding.
I'm curious about that existential lensing so early on. Is
Yeah.
there a specific example that you can remember, or are there typical situations that you would find yourself as a child reflecting in that
Sure.
deep way?
Yeah. I remember in I don't know what grade I was in, maybe grade 2 or 3 or something, and I remember I don't know if it came from insecurity or, like, uh, being different. I can't really remember, but I remember thinking to myself, being shy about what I was presenting outward, like, or I can't remember was I what I was who I was, or I was insecure about what I looked like or something like that. But I remember going, "Well, people don't really know who's inside. Like, I could be that person, they could be me, and this is just a body, and we could be switched." Like, just this idea that there's something within that's different than what we're presenting, and that I could have been born in someone else's body and then mine, like, just this
Mm.
trying to figure out yeah, yeah, just trying to figure out, like, what we are inside beyond just the physical form that we're presenting.
And did you come to any conclusions?
No, but I found it reassuring. I found it reassuring to think like, "Oh, well, wait a second. They could be me and I could be them." There's something about that was reassuring to me.
That's so interesting, Yamina. I'm
Yeah.
curious, did that interrelatedness and interconnection extend beyond the human world?
So later in life, I did a course, I think it's called animism, and but I was like, "Oh, I always had feelings for inanimate objects." Like, I had, like, like, a bag on the road that got ran over, like, it really hurt my heart, like, just, like, I felt for things. But, yeah, to me, everything always had, like, sort of, like, a soul or a liveliness to it.
Hmm. It sounds like you were very empathetic.
To me, everything was alive, everything had feelings.
How did seeing the humanity or the aliveness of others and in the natural world or the world in general, how did that help you feel like a human or that you were alive?
Mm, I don't know. That's as we talk about this, as when I was younger, it was hard for me to to comprehend that the magnitude or depth or with which I see the world or experience the world, to think how expansive that is, to think everybody has that experience of the world in their own way and all these stories and all these to me, it's flabbergasting that all of these experiences, massive experiences, it's almost like how's there space for all of this? It's, I guess, consciousness? I don't know. I think when I was younger, it was hard for me to imagine that, like, my whole world, that's just me having one experience. It feels so big, and that there's, like, billions of people having this
Mhm.
same kind of big conscious experience. I think it took a while for me to develop that even possibility, because when you're a kid, your world is small. Like, again, I was trying to make sense of, like, are you guys just actors here? Like, what? Like, just for
Yes.
me to, like, have this experience in life? Like, how is it possible that all these people are all also having these massive life experiences? I don't know. And I don't think it's supposed to make sense because not that I can make sense of the world now, but when you're a child, it's really hard to make sense of. So,
Did you ever talk about these sorts of things with your parents or with your siblings?
mm, I don't think so. No,
Mm.
no. I don't think I had these conversations with my friends or with anyone. Just me in my mind.
Those are big things to be thinking about all
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
And so, thinking about these big existential questions that you were holding as a child and being curious about privately,
Hmm.
and thinking about psychedelics and non-ordinary states of consciousness, was there any discussion of psychedelics or non-ordinary states of consciousness? Was there any discussion or appreciation of awe or wonder within your childhood and your sort of spiritual or cultural context?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think I don't know, I personally, I don't know, let's call it magic or the power of thought. It was always something that I believed in. Like, I remember I don't know if I've ever told anybody this story. I remember I was in school and we were playing, like, some game where you're trying to roll the ball and hit something down, and it was my team's turn to go, and I just really wanted my team to win, right? So I was staring at that ball really hard, convinced that if I stared at it hard enough, I could, like, will it to hit the thing, and it hit the thing, and of course, I was like, right? Like, I had this or I'd, like, stare at the clouds and, like, really stare at them, and then, like, they'd move, and I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I can make the clouds move." Like, I really genuinely and I was almost scared of, like, I wouldn't stare at anything too long because I was scared that it would move. Like, I that kind of thing was just always with me, this possibility, this that there's more than what we see or that humans have more capacity than what we're using. Mind you, I was always really afraid of, like, ghosts and extraterrestrials as well, so I always had this idea that there's more. That may have been from watching too much Unsolved Mysteries, but,
Did
um
that possibility of power, of control scary? It sounds like it was a little bit scary, is it?
well, I think it's yeah, it was scary because, like, well, what does it mean if that's true? If that is actually true, if we can do that and these things, what does that mean? What does that mean for us? Yeah, it was the scary part.
Mm.
I've always felt like God forbid this happens, but I think I'd be less scared if somebody broke into my house than if I saw a ghost. Because like, somebody, breaks in your house, there's, like, a physical I know what to do with that, and, like, a ghost is beyond me. I don't have control over that. That's what I thought when I was younger, you know?
How interesting that that is the scarier thing, and yet what I'm hearing you say is that as a kid, you were experiencing the world very relationally and
Yeah.
seeing others as yourself.
Yes.
That materiality, it sounds like, was very grounding and helped you feel safe
Yeah.
in a way that immateriality felt scary?
Yes. Very
Hmm.
much so. Yeah.
And again, so thinking about moving into awe
Mhm.
and a psychedelic experience, there's a lot of immateriality and non-dual sort of
Right.
inquiry within a psychedelic state. So maybe we could talk a little bit about your movement into a contemplation of psychedelics. Were psychedelics discussed in school? Did you ever
Sure,
talk about them
yeah,
with your
yeah.
friends?
I remember I'm thinking about it, and I mean, there was the war on drugs, like, Just Say No, that was around. I don't remember that affecting me much, like, I do remember a family member, like a trusted adult family member telling me I think I was a teenager at the time. I might have asked. I did when I became a teenager, I asked. I asked all kinds of questions, no holds bar. My poor parents. But yeah, so I did have a family member share that they had tried LSD once when they were, in their 20s and I don't think it was anything profound for them, but they talked about how they were a party and, they saw pretty colors and then they ended up spending the evening washing the bathtub because thought it was so pretty. So I don't think it was threatening to me. I don't remember psychedelics ever being threatening in any way. It wasn't talked about in the family. And I grew up, I don't think I knew what spirituality was growing up. And I went to a public school. My father was Muslim, and we followed, cultural sort of norms, but he never imposed the beliefs on us. So I wouldn't consider myself necessarily following the religion, nor was it imposed on us. And I have a lot of I have a lot of appreciation for that because and this is another thing I remember being really curious about religion, and I found it odd that people's beliefs seem to be clumped in different areas. So then I started questioning, is that a belief or is that an influenced sort of perspective. Like, if people were coming to this internally, these beliefs, then wouldn't it be just, like, randomly popping up everywhere? But I just always found curiosity in different areas of the world were the same sort of belief systems.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, so, like, even if you look at family, that's a culture, family units. Typically, a family member will follow the same religion as their family members, typically. Or typically, you'll find mostly in, Nepal, you'll find a lot of Buddhists, or in India, you'll find a lot of Hinduism, so that to me was curious as a child, where it was like, is this your truth, or is this what you're like, depending on where you're born, you will end up with sort of a belief system. So that I found very interesting, right? Is this actually coming from someone's inner experience or belief, or is this being suggested to them and this is what they're born into? And I say all this because it's one of the things I do appreciate about my upbringing, having grown up in a public school and had nothing imposed on me in terms of beliefs. That when I did come to spirituality, it really felt internal. It really felt like it came from within. I didn't have to siphon through, like, okay, do I believe this? Do I not? And I know some people come into religion where it's suggested they believe it as a child, and then they become a teenager and they have to question, like, is this something that, and they come back to it, and but yeah, I really appreciate sort of having had sort of from what I think, a blank slate. Who knows? There's always undercurrents of suggestibility, but yeah.
But it sounds like you felt like the spirituality that you experience today is one that is chosen.
Yeah. Well, that's a yeah, that's actually a good, does it feel chosen? It felt like a slap in the face, but in a good way, like a conk over the head. It was so sudden. But yes, 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 to the point of, like, where even when I try and explain it to, like, my family, then everyone's like, "Okay," everybody's willing to listen and respect, but do they really get what I'm saying? Perhaps not, but yeah.
And to your point, part of that is, do they need to understand? The only
Mhm,
person who needs to understand perhaps is you.
mhm. Yeah,
And I love that you have something that you understand and
yeah,
that feels true to you.
yeah, yeah.
And I love how that's connected to your childhood and the openness, and exposure to a religious tradition, and
Mhm,
also an openness to make your own choice, to observe and then to
mhm,
make your own
yes.
choices as opposed to
Yeah,
having to do anything or follow anything without
yeah,
reflection.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. You
And
have such a
so
beautiful way of reflecting back.
I'm just reflecting back what I
Yeah,
hear, but
yeah,
it's beautiful, your story.
thank you.
So it sounds like the first time you heard about psychedelics was as a teenager that you heard about.
Yeah, I probably had heard about it through school or things like that. I don't, and, TV, but the first time I asked, a family member about it, that was as far back as I can remember the response I got.
And did that spark something in you, or was it sort of a moment and then eventually something else
Yeah,
prompted you to wonder if it was for you and not just an anecdotal story from someone else?
I think it was just, yeah, I just kind of left it there. I don't know that it necessarily prompted curiosity, but it did. I think it did induce a sense of safety, like a sense of maybe not being necessarily afraid of it, but it just, I think, I don't remember why I asked. It must have been just a passing question. And I did have an older brother, to be fair. I wondered sometimes too, like, if there's an older sibling involved, if that sort of influences it. It must have. My brother, yeah, was also a little bit adventurous, and perhaps having known that or heard stories from him, but that I don't remember, but I would think that that might have influenced me as well. That the fact that he was kind of, open, and yeah.
Cool. So when did you start moving from a place of hearing about others to wondering about it for yourself?
Mhm. That's a really good question, Amy. I mean, I'm 47 now, and my first experience must have been when I I would say 18, perhaps?
Oh,
17, 18. I was camping. It was like a school end of year camping trip. I genuinely cannot remember, like, sitting there thinking about shouldn't I don't I just remember the experience. I just remember the experience, and
Can you tell us a little bit about the run up to this camping trip? Was it a school organized thing? Was it with friends? I assume it was the end of high school?
yeah, it was the end of high school, yeah. It was one of those, like, at the end of the year for high school. I can't remember, I was in grade 12 or 13, and experience itself was with a friend of mine, and we'll call him M, and my friend M and I.
Or
Yeah, it was the summer, it's friends, it's end of year, there's maybe 20 of us, and it's the evening, and yeah, that's the setting. Summertime,
mm,
that's the setting.
that's
Yeah.
lovely. And so you were out with friends and you and M decided to take some
Yeah, take some
psychedelics,
t yeah, we took, yeah, some mushrooms, and
mushrooms.
I can't tell you, it's possible that other people in our circle did them too, but we retreated, and we were sitting there. I remember, I think we were sharing a tent, and this guy was very intelligent, he's a doctor now, and I remember just, like, I was beside myself at how my perception changed so much. I was absolutely shocked at how was it that I was seeing these little gnomes in the corner that were clearly not there, but that my brain was somehow allowing me to see these little gnomes in the corner, right? And the colors I was seeing, and
Mm.
that to me was, and it's so interesting. I've not thought back to this in so long, Amy, and you sent me some questions, examples, and talking about the first time, and it's incredible. I was like, "Oh yeah, this is what sparked it." I remember again in that curious mind being like, "Oh my gosh, like we can experience the world in a whole different way with just one substance." And I became extremely curious. And I remember saying to myself, one day I'm going to figure this out. And I don't remember that. And that now I'm like thinking back to this, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the start of it. I remember thinking, I need to figure out how this is tricking the brain, or how this is doing this to the brain. How does this work? How is this possible? And also thinking, wow, if we are able to take this substance to completely shift the way that we see things, why aren't we doing that?
So those are some of the conclusions, and what I'm hearing in how it's sort of pulled into your current life is how does this work? And the materiality of it, like how does our brains work?
Yeah.
How do our brains work? Do you have a sense of how much you might have taken?
Ooh, great question. Poof. I that's funny that yeah, I would right now be like, "Oh, yeah, it must have been a gram," but no, I've not ever done a gram and seen gnomes in the corners. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know. It might maybe a gram or 2, maybe a couple of gram I don't remember, and I mean, the start of my whole journey with psychedelics was really not measured. It
Mhm.
was yeah, yeah,
As is often the case for folks,
yeah.
but it was psilocybin mushrooms and, enough of a dose that you were still able to be in an altered state of consciousness, but also aware that you were in altered states of
Yeah,
consciousness.
yeah, and to your point, at first, the curiosity was more of the, like, the biological impact of it, I don't remember being so moved, in essence, like, in a more spiritual or existential or way. It was just more like, "Oh, how's the brain doing this?" But as time went on, and it was through actually more experience with psilocybin where I started to feel that more spiritual opening.
Mhm.
Yeah, and with MDMA, that heart opening, and getting curious about that space, and just being how it's possible. How can we experience that state? How can we bring that back? I started to get
Mm.
curious as to how we can integrate that into our day-to-day lives. If it's possible in that state, it must be possible in our regular state.
Mm.
Yeah.
Maybe we can come back to that in 1 second,
Sure.
but I'm curious just about that first experience, a couple other
Yeah.
questions. So you took some mushrooms. Did you feel nervous? How was the come up? Do you remember?
I don't remember
Mhm.
the come up. I don't remember feeling nervous. But like I said, yeah, that I've not thought about that particular journey in a while, and it's just this that's prompted it.
Was music at all involved in that
No,
first I'm
that first
surprised
experience,
because you
no.
love music so much.
Yeah, no, yeah, because it was the camping trip, it was quiet. I mean, I remember a lot of laughter,
Mhm.
but yeah, there was no music.
Was there a particular emotional tone or tenor for you?
Playfulness,
Hmm.
if that yeah, if
Mhm.
that counts. I remember it being, like, light and playful. I remember also my friends seeming less in awe, just more matter of fact about the whole thing. Yeah.
You talked about the materiality of the brain and the curiosity that that
Mhm.
elicited. Were there any other specific insights or visions? You also talked about the gnomes or any feelings from that first experience that have stayed with you?
I don't think these gnome characters I talk about, in thinking back now, I don't think they were simply there. I think they were in relation with me. Like, I do genuinely think it was this, like, "We're over here, but here's this thing over here. Hey," trying to get my attention maybe, but doing their own thing. Yeah, and this is again maybe me putting meaning to it, but almost a like, "Psst, psst, there's this thing. We have some
Mhm.
information for you. Don't forget to come back." Again, like I said, it sparked my curiosity. I was like, "Oh my god," but I don't remember after that. I think after that, that was my introduction. Like, there was no fear around it. There was like, yeah, of course I would do this thing. I don't remember necessarily seeking it out, but,
It
the
didn't feel
start
like
of
that was the last time you were gonna be in that state of mind.
no. And nor did it feel like I got it, like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta do this again right away," It was just this, "Oh, here's this really interesting thing I don't need to be afraid of."
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting thread between your childhood being so aware of others, and through that being so aware of yourself in relation to
Mm.
others.
Mm.
And then I love how that sort of showed up very gently in the journey, in the sense of, like, being aware of these little gnomes, but you were in relation with them,
Yeah.
and you were not separate.
Yeah.
There's a permissiveness. You belong in
Mhm.
both of these places.
Mhm.
Part of what I'm hearing in how you experienced yourself in childhood and feeling like you exist because other people are existing and everyone's having this consciousness existing experience.
Mhm.
And then with your first psychedelic experience being like, I exist in this body and in this brain, and my brain can do this.
Mhm.
And these little gnomes or these visions that I'm having are validating of this whole experience together and that it's safe and it's okay. And maybe there's something
Oh.
about me and for me in this experience.
Ah.
To me, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but there's an embrace in these encounters through and with others that seems warm
Mhm.
and validating and welcoming in terms
Mhm.
of your place in the collection of things. I think that's Mary Oliver, but
Yeah, and, as you're talking too, I'm like, "Oh, it probably brought back, a place for those existential thoughts to exist and actually be less internalized and more actually." Yeah, yeah,
that's a
yeah,
great way of putting it. Yes, it's an
um,
outlet, a place for your curiosity to unfurl.
yeah, yeah, and almost like, I don't know, almost like a language for it, or vocabulary for it, or like a more it's not concrete. Gnomes in a corner is not concrete, but this whole psychedelic realm, it's something that we can talk about. There's a platform for this conversation, right? Where
Mhm.
it's a bit tougher, when I was a kid, there was no platform for this. So it really just, yeah, it allows it to be alive and breathing and more concrete, I think.
That's beautifully put.
Yeah.
In the concrete, or it's both concrete and in that sort of spiritual side of things, also very ethereal. I'm curious how you understand spirituality or what you've learned in your exploration since that first experience
Yeah.
about what is true and what are some of the answers you found from those first initial childhood experiences of
Mhm.
consciousness and existence.
What so the conversation we're having, sort of what sparked for me. Well, because I all of a sudden jumped forward. I actually all of a sudden jumped forward to sitting for people, and what this whole, even that first encounter, and as we're talking about it, it made it concrete, is where that spirituality gets to live outside of my mind, and it gets to live in this human experience that I'm having. There's a language for it. It gets to be more integrated now, right? And when I'm sitting or doing the psychedelic assisted therapy sessions, I'm profoundly grateful and moved that, because I'm sitting with people who are in the space, they're in that realm. And here I am, I know the space they're in, and my mind is one that is uninfluenced. It is unaltered.
Yes.
However, I get to call all that stuff in that exists there anyway and speak it, and it makes sense. These people who are under the influence, it's a really neat way to just be able to, like, speak that language and feel that language and speak that truth, or just the way that I experience life that always kind of feels altered, to be honest, in my own mind. But in the psychedelic space, it just gets to exist without question, without it being misplaced or misunderstood, I suppose.
Mm. Yes.
That makes sense, yeah.
Does it feel like when you willed the ball into the spot or when the clouds parted in a particular way? Does it does it scratch that itch or
Yes, I guess with a little less, like, feeling of, like, I can control things that much, but I I think it's just, yeah, I mean, sometimes, depending on who your audience is or where you're at, probably when I was a kid, I couldn't talk about that stuff because I don't know that I really felt as though that would be welcome, or that's really what people are talking about. And in the same way, sometimes, like, I think without this platform of psychedelics and where I can integrate the spirituality, there's almost this having to not shut down, but, like, keep at bay, you know what I mean? Because it's
yes.
not, yeah, the language or the questions or just the perception of, not everybody sees the world that way, which is totally fine, but then there's more having to temper it down, I suppose. Whereas in this space, it's just normal talk, normal talk. And it doesn't actually need to be about psychedelics either. I think just the psychedelics allow for that esoteric conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, things don't need to be as curated or there's
Mhm.
a common understanding that
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
words don't do a great job of describing, but
Yeah.
yes. You obviously have an ongoing and deep connection with the psychedelic space in your work and personally. I'm curious, we often talk about a calling in artistic pursuits
Mhm.
or in a spiritual sense. Do you feel that psychedelics called to you in some way?
That's a good question. No, in thinking about it, I think that the psychedelics, I think there's something beyond that's calling to me, and the psychedelics are a tool, or I don't know, a tool, like, a means to access or to explore further that realm of consciousness. I think there's something beyond the psychedelics that created that calling, and that the psychedelics are a portal to explore more. That yeah, yeah. And I mean,
I,
I genuinely, I think about I have such reverence, mushrooms, they have so much wisdom, like, they've been around for so long, and they carry so much wisdom, and yeah, I do believe that there's a wisdom in there, and there's a desire to share in there, that calling, and I think perhaps it's from, having had a spontaneous, non-dual experience that just came to me without the use of psychedelics, and so I think psychedelics, for me, have been a way to make sense of that.
yes.
Yeah.
Would you be open to sharing a little bit about that awakening that you had?
Yeah. I mean, I had that first experience, and then moving on, I continued to explore with psilocybin, with mushrooms, and went on to explore a little more MDMA. But when I had this experience, I was not under the influence at all, and I was, mind you, it was I didn't know how to make sense of it, and still I grasped to try and make sense of it. I'd been in a car accident a month before that was, it could have been fatal. I was never in critical condition, but I think maybe my body jolted and knew, or my being. So I don't know if it's that, because I tried to research it quite a bit because it was quite profoundly changing. But I was walking down the road one day, and I remember just having this experience where it all of a sudden felt like I was being dropped into my body for the first time. Like, I felt like there was no separation between myself and others or the environment. There was a sense that I like the sensation I had was not just in my body, it was my whole energy. And because I felt like I was part of everything, I couldn't understand how all of that fit in this body. I had a profound sense of peace and a profound knowing, what felt like a knowing to me, that we don't come into existence when we're born, and we don't leave existence when we die, and that everything is exactly as it should is supposed to be, that there's nothing out of place. And all it was like this massive download, where prior to that, I was just, like, going about my life. I'm 25 years old, I'm, like, doing my thing. And actually, quite frankly, at that time, I just had this idea of, like, "Ralph, you believe in anything beyond, that something happens after you die, you're probably just afraid to die." That was my concept of things at that point, and it was really hard to make sense of, but it was it felt so profound, and it really was difficult for some time too, because it's kinda like somebody, for 25 years, I thought the world to be a certain way, which is a bit of a lie. Now that I talk about, when I was a kid and stuff, I think I always had that sort of more different perspective, but I think it got, as I got older, I just went into this concrete way of being like, "You live, you die, and that's that." But yeah, that really brought about for me a sense of meaning, a sense of understanding, a sense of what became true to me and what became real to me is relationship. And again, as we talk about what became, it was always there. And I think that's why I said I got conked in the head, because I was just sort of, mindlessly wandering away from it, it seems, in my, early 20s, and I got conked in the head with this experience. And it was profoundly helpful because it brought meaning to my life. And what mattered again was, I say, is relationship, and and we're here to support each other and to learn, to grow. Like, it all for me gave purpose and meaning. I mean, we're human. We're going to experience pain, but reduced the resistance of suffering, right? For me, it made pain more manageable because there was sense to it. It's exactly as it meant to be. We're here to grow, there's purpose in suffering now. And from that point, I thought too, I can't impose this on people. I can't put a wand on people and say, here, experience the world in this way. But I came to learn later on that a lot of people through mystical experience, through psychedelics, have something similar. So the psychedelics became this portal to this thing that I had experienced, this thing in a portal for others to potentially have an experience in which they find more purpose and meaning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you consider that near-death experience and the subsequent coming into your body a month
Mhm.
later, would you consider that a mystical experience?
Yes. I mean, by what I've now, like, having done, research and understood that, yes. Yes. And what was remarkable about it is it was like it was 7 months. It stayed with me for a long time, which I think was also hard to understand because in a lot of the readings and the research, it's like if it's like this quick sort of experience. And I mean the potency of it wore off after time, but I lived in this space of absolute peace and gratitude and I mean, it's not to say that I never got sad and things like that, but everything just really, made sense. And also, I remember sometimes being, I'd be at the beach or whatever. I'm 25 years old. I'm with my buddies, and they're still talking about, whatever happened last night. And I was just like, I just wanted to shake everybody, like, oh my gosh, isn't it crazy that we're here? What are we doing here? And so in some ways, it's a bit frustrating, right? Because I just wanted to talk about the magic of life and the so it's definitely a life adjustment, having to
Mm.
sort of learn how to be in that space, still surrounded in the world that I was. Yeah.
What's your relationship to that experience today? Because that was, 20 years ago. I'm curious if you tap back into that often or if it feels as present?
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is something that I, talk to people about and clients and myself. And when something for me, it became a knowing, and although it's perhaps not potent in times where I'm just like, I don't know, like white knuckling life, we have those moments, or I'm in the mud and it feels like, am I going to get out of this mud? Although I can't necessarily access that place of like, "Oh, yeah, this is all fine, it makes sense." I know it. So I hold on to that knowing. It's like there's a part of me that witness, but it's just waiting to come back. It's the foundation for me, and it's the container, although sometimes it's not necessarily as accessible, it's still, I know it. Does
Mm,
that make sense? I can't necessarily feel it all the time, but I know it all the time.
yes.
Yeah.
And I love how you put that in the sense that it's just a remembering
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
it's accessible.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, Yamina, and I really appreciate you sharing both your first psychedelic experience, but also your childhood experience and then your subsequent near-death experience, which are
Mhm.
just as psychedelic as experiences with substances. I really appreciate how you talk about the use of psychedelics as a means, but not the thing, because the thing
Mhm.
is there and we can access it in different ways.
Yeah, and I think they're very, yeah, like you said, interrelated. It's hard for me to it is hard for me to separate them and know what's what
Mhm.
and know what I took from which. To me, they're just really interconnected. Yeah.
And so as we wrap up the conversation together today, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who is either contemplating a psychedelic experience or maybe someone who, like you, had an altered state of consciousness or mystical experience without the use of psychedelics and is not sure how to integrate it or what to do with it? Do you have any advice for folks?
Yeah, I mean, what came up first for me was don't be afraid to talk about it. I think, looking back, it's definitely I didn't know where to go with that. I didn't know who to talk to about that. But it's almost like what I'd want to say is like don't give up looking for that person, that mentor, that guide, that even the person who can relate to you. because that'll revive it. The way that I see it is when, somebody has an opening like that or a curiosity, it'll poke its head back, right? It will. But anyway, to answer the question that you're saying, because to me it's a spark. It's like it's an offering. Bring that curiosity around the psychedelics or having the mystical experiences is an offering. To be able to receive that, I think there needs to be sort of a landing, and so my encouragement would be to, like, hold that because we can also if we can't find somewhere to put it, it just gets kinda tucked away. Was that as profound as I thought? Did that really happen? Or I don't know what to do with that. I've heard many people talk about having had this experience, and it was so profound, not knowing what to do with it and tucking it away and then revisiting it 15 years later. Again, like, having sat for people, it is a thing like, "Oh, man, like, yeah, I remember I didn't know what to do with it, and here's again, and I kinda wish I had pursued it," and so, yeah, just finding that person, finding that group, finding that place to make sense of it from.
Do you think the psychedelics entered your life at the exact moment, or do you feel like something different might have unfolded if they had come into your life earlier or later?
Yeah, so for me, it would have to be looking at it later because earlier, so and wondering, like, what would that have looked like later? I often wonder. I don't think there's any shoulds, I think everything is as it's meant to be, but I do wonder what would that have been like if it entered later in my life? I don't know. I there's a part of me that's like, would I be less confused about trying to pick apart what's what? What gave me what? We try and think, is it the psychedelics that offer the spiritual opening? When I've experienced that? Was it the near-death experience? That's the curiosity I have around that is knowing what impacted what and what influenced what. Yeah.
Does it matter?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Just being curious.
That's a
What
good
would that
question.
answer give you that you don't already have? I love that curiosity. I don't mean to shut it down, but I'm
Oh, no, not at
curious
all. No, no,
what
no,
the
yeah.
imagined what would feel different if those questions were answered.
Yeah. You know, I don't I think I already answered that question for myself. I remember taking a hiatus from psychedelics because I was curious. I was like, "Is it possible to access these points without psychedelics? Is it just the psychedelic?" And I went on a hiatus, and I think I've maybe shared this with you before, but decided to live in India for a year and do all the meditations and the workshops and the this and the that. And yeah, I mean, if you sit and do the things, you can be that expansive. It is accessible. And so then I was able to lean back into it. I don't know why I had to prove it to myself or what it mattered, why it mattered. It's a good question. But I just for some reason, I can just land more comfortably in it. And maybe that's an ego thing. Maybe that's a no, like, I need to know that this is possible without the other things. I don't know. I don't know where that comes from.
Did it
And
validate your near-death experience or your mystical experience by
perhaps, yes, very much so. I think I needed to I felt a bit odd after, meaning I felt out of place in this Western world. I hadn't yet surrounded myself with the people that could have that understanding, and so I started to wonder, am I crazy? Of course, when I went out there, there's a whole world of people who have a perspective from a non-dual place, and so that really just solidified things for me. Yeah.
I'm glad you got that validation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yamina, for this conversation. Is there any other parting words or thoughts? Anything you wanna
Um,
share before we close today?
no, thank you. Thank you so much for the curiosity and the winding road. It was and the gentle challenges too to look at and think about and remember.
Well, Yamina, this has been such a lovely conversation. I've learned new things about you, which is always a delight, and I so appreciate how thoughtful you are and how much curiosity, that beautiful curiosity as a child is still so, like, alive and present and, like, embodied in you, in your work, in yourself, in your heart.
Thank you very much. It's always an absolute pleasure to speak with you. I learn more about myself as well when we chat. And it means a lot to me that you're so interested and curious about my experience. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.